Hello, Jays Nation. Welcome back to your YouTube channel, the Toronto Blue Jays News Network. In today's video, Toronto Blue Jays trade deadline, shocking moves, big risks, and why Toronto may have won. Before starting the video, if you are a true Blue Jays fan, then don't miss this video and don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video. The Toronto Blue Jays just made a series of moves that could completely change the direction of their 2026 season. And one of these trades, nobody saw it coming. Toronto just traded away one of its most highly regarded young prospects, a former first-round pick, a player many believed could become a future star. And what did the Blue Jays get in return? A major league starting pitcher with multiple years of control remaining. But that's only half of the story, because Toronto also made the emotional decision to trade away Kevin Gausman after nearly 5 seasons with the organization. Yes, Kevin Gausman is gone. And now Blue Jays fans are asking one huge question. What exactly is Toronto doing? Are the Blue Jays buying? Are they selling? Are they rebuilding? Or are they trying to do all three at the same time? Because when you look closely at these trades, that's exactly what it appears Toronto has done. And if their biggest gamble works, the Blue Jays could have just improved their team for both 2026 and the years ahead. But if it fails, Toronto could be looking back at this deadline wondering what went wrong. So let's break it all down, because there is a lot happening here. Chapter 1. Toronto had a problem. Let's rewind for a second. Coming into 2026, expectations for Toronto were massive. Why? Because the Blue Jays had just completed a historic 2025 campaign. They reached the World Series. They proved they could compete with the best teams in baseball, and suddenly the standard changed. Nobody wanted a good season. Nobody wanted moral victories. Toronto wanted another championship run. But 2026, it hasn't gone according to plan. The Blue Jays have been inconsistent. They've been stuck somewhere in the middle, good enough to stay relevant, but not dominant enough to make everyone believe they're a legitimate World Series favorite. And that put the front office in an incredibly difficult position. At the trade deadline, Toronto had 2 choices: buy or sell. But instead, the Blue Jays chose something much more complicated. They tried to do both. And that's where things get really interesting. Chapter 2. The trade that shocked everyone. Let's start with the biggest move. Toronto traded away Arjun Nimala. And yes, you read that correctly. Nimala was Toronto's first-round pick in 2023. He was one of the organization's highest-ranked prospects. And he's only 20 years old. So naturally, when the news broke, Blue Jays fans had questions. Why would Toronto give up on a player this young? Well, the answer isn't necessarily that Toronto gave up on him. The answer is that Toronto believed it could turn his potential into something more immediate, because Nimala has struggled. Through 284 minor league games, he's hitting just .236, and he struck out 304 times. Now, before anyone starts writing him off, remember this. He's 20 years old. That's incredibly young. There is still plenty of time for him to develop. He could still become a star. But here's the problem for Toronto. The Blue Jays aren't building for some distant future. They still believe they can win right now. And that changed the calculation. Instead of waiting years to find out what Nimala becomes, Toronto turned his potential into an established major league pitcher. And that pitcher is Jose Soriano. Chapter 3. Jose Soriano is the gamble. This is where the trade gets really interesting, because Soriano isn't just some rental. Toronto acquired more than 2 years of control. That's huge. The Blue Jays aren't paying a massive prospect price for 3 months of pitching. They're betting on Soriano becoming part of the rotation for years. And there is a lot to like. Soriano enters Toronto with a 3.29 ERA and a 125 ERA+. Those are strong numbers. But there's a catch. Actually, there's a pretty big catch. The walks. Soriano has always had command issues. And this season, those problems have followed him. He's leading the league in walks through his first 22 starts. He's averaging around 4.2 walks per 9 innings. That's dangerous. You can have electric stuff. You can throw hard. You can make hitters uncomfortable. But if you're constantly putting runners on base, eventually somebody makes you pay. And Toronto knows that. So the question becomes, can the Blue Jays fix Soriano's command? Because if they can, watch out. Chapter 4. The upside is massive. Think about this for a second. Toronto just acquired a young pitcher who has already shown he can be an above-average major league starter. He's under control for multiple seasons, and he still has room to improve. That's exactly the kind of player contenders dream about acquiring. But there is another reason this trade makes sense. Soriano doesn't have to be perfect. He just has to be better than the uncertainty Toronto was facing with Nimmala. And that's the gamble. Nimmala could become a star. There's no question. But Toronto doesn't know. Nobody knows. Prospects are projections. Soriano? We've already seen him pitch in the majors. We've already seen the stuff. We've already seen the results. Now Toronto has to unlock consistency. And if that happens, this trade could look completely different a year from now. Chapter 5. But Toronto gave up more than Nimmala. Here's another detail that shouldn't be overlooked. Toronto didn't simply send Nimmala away. Micheletti was also part of the package. He's 24 years old, a former 8th-round pick, and he's shown some interesting offensive tools. He's got sneaky power. He can get on base, but he hasn't moved beyond Double-A. Then there's Rivero, a young pitcher who has pitched extremely well in rookie ball this season, but there's a problem. Strike zone control. He struggles to consistently throw strikes. So what did Toronto do? They took 3 players with varying levels of potential and turned them into one major league starter. That tells you exactly what the front office values right now. Certainty. Chapter 6. And then came the Gausman shocker. But if the Soriano trade shocked you, wait until you hear this. Kevin Gausman was traded to the Chicago Cubs. After nearly 5 seasons in Toronto, Gausman is gone. And this one hurts. Because Gausman wasn't just another pitcher. He became one of the most important members of the Blue Jays rotation. He pitched through pressure. He delivered big performances. And he became part of the identity of Toronto's pitching staff. But baseball is a business. And Gausman's contract was expiring. That meant Toronto had a decision to make. Keep him or trade him and potentially lose him for nothing later. The Blue Jays chose the trade. And now comes the important part. Toronto got prospects back. Chapter 7. Toronto's new prospects. The first name to watch is Bateman. He's ranked around number 20 on mlb.com's prospect list. And he's having an excellent season in Triple-A. He's hitting .311. His OPS is .845. And he's already stolen 20 bases. That's a very interesting profile. He doesn't have overwhelming power, but he gets on base. He can run. And he primarily plays center field. And that could become extremely valuable for Toronto, because the Blue Jays are going to need athleticism and depth in their outfield. Could Bateman eventually become part of that solution? Absolutely. And here's the scary part. He doesn't need to become a superstar for this trade to work. If he becomes a reliable major league contributor, Toronto wins. Chapter 8. Then there's Southacene, and Toronto didn't stop there. The Blue Jays also acquired Southacene. He's just 21 years old, and he's putting together a strong season in High A. He's hitting .301. His OPS is .785, and he's stolen 31 bases in just 68 games. But the most impressive part might be his plate discipline. Across his minor league career, he's walked 104 times. He's struck out 99 times. Think about that. A young player who is getting on base, not striking out excessively, and stealing bases at a high rate. That's an interesting player. He's also shown enough defensive ability to potentially remain at shortstop. And if his development continues, Toronto could have another legitimate major league option down the road. Chapter 9. Why the Gausman trade makes sense. Now let's talk about the emotional side. Blue Jays fans loved Gausman. That's understandable. But the front office couldn't make this decision based on emotion. If Toronto believed Gausman wasn't likely to re-sign, then keeping him simply because fans loved him would have been bad business. The Blue Jays had an asset. His contract was expiring, and they converted that asset into 2 prospects. That's smart roster management. Could Gausman dominate with Chicago? Absolutely. Could he make Toronto regret trading him? Of course. But that's not the point. The point is that Toronto got value before losing control of the situation. And that's exactly what good front offices are supposed to do. If new information becomes available, we'll bring you another complete update as soon as it's announced. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest Toronto Blue Jays news, injury updates, trade rumors, and in-depth baseball analysis. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.